Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Voices. And Voices is a program of the Communication Department of the Atlantic Caribbean Union of Seventh-day Adventists. In this union, we cover the territories of the Cayman Islands, the Turks and Caicos, and of course, the North and the South Bahamas conferences. And so we welcome you today. We have this very special edition of Voices coming to you when we highlight a man whom God has called to ministry, who has given his entire life to service, and whose life has impacted so many of us. I'm talking about Pastor Silas Napoleon McKinney. And today on Voices, we want to reflect with our president, who will share in the program, and we're just delighted to be able to look back to just see how God is blessed. And when we place ourselves in His care, we know that God will take care of everything. So we say welcome to Pastor Leonard A. Johnson, a friend and a brother, God's manservant, a man who has come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
Pastor Clark, what a privilege to be on Voices once again. And rightly so, as we reflect on one of our leaders, a great man of God, a soldier, a man of all seasons and all times, Pastor Napoleon McKinney, as you rightly said.
And Pastor Johnson, I don't know if you've thought about it, but we've only got two Bahamian sons who have served as presidents of unions.
Wow, that's something to think about. You caught me there.
All right. And we're
Yes,
delighted.
that is
So
true.
I just want you to, as you and I went to school together in terms of
Yes.
Jamaica, we've been touched by Pastor McKinney. And I just want to say this because you're going to be able to bring him on. I'd like for you to do that. We had the opportunity to work very closely with him.
Yes.
My first assignment was Johnson Park. Do you remember your first?
My first assignment, wow, where was that? Centerville Church?
It was at Centerville Church.
Yes,
all right.
Pastor Roach.
That's it.
Yes.
And then after that, I was sent to Grand Bahama.
After that, I was sent to Ingliston,
Okay.
which is now they call New Ingliston on East Street, but that really was the genesis of Hillview.
Okay. All right. Well, it was at Grand Bahama, 1982,
Yes.
January, that I had the opportunity to work with Pastor and Sister McKinney. And I share often that it helped to shape ministry in such a powerful way. And you've talked and you know, and we've all experienced the joy of Pastor McKinney. Tell us a little bit about him. And on this show, we're going to also introduce other persons who will talk about him.
Pastor McKinney, Pastor Clark, was an interesting personality. He was very talented, very gifted, and a very strong and caring person. He could rightly be described as a people-oriented individual. And let me explain what I mean by this. I did an article not too long ago, and I referred to him as the consummate socializer. But I came across another expression by Pastor Noel Fraser, a friend of Pastor McKinney for some 60 years. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
60 years. And what Pastor Fraser mentioned in describing Pastor McKinney was that he was the Archbishop of Fellowship. Okay. The Archbishop of Fellowship. And that expression really stuck with me because it encapsulates, it describes adequately and correctly Pastor McKinney. He was a man of great fellowship. And this is something that you could not overlook when you came into his presence. Yes, he was a hard worker. Yes, he was a good, outstanding theologian. Yes, he was a gifted preacher, evangelist, and mind you, an outstanding administrator of the church. But putting all of these aside, he must fellowship. And I could recall one occasion, I was invited by the then Bahamas Conference president, Jeremiah Duncombe, to go to Miami. I thought I was going to Miami to help with the procurement of a video projector, the first for our conference, for our church. And when I got to Miami, I met all of these other individuals. Pastor McKinney was the president of the union in Jamaica at the time. And all of these other field presidents, I was requested to rent a minivan, and I would drive to Orlando to see Tim Walters, former union president, who was not doing well at the time. And for that journey, some 3 hours, Pastor McKinney talk just about non-stop, you know. Now, this is not something negative. It just was, we're talking about church history, theology, politics. But man, he kept the conversation going non-stop. And then when we got to the point, man, he said to Pastor Barnes, you know, well, it's time to eat. Let's go and fellowship, man.
He was certainly a person of fellowship.
Yes.
He was a communicator.
Yes.
I've seen him in operations like that. And one of the things, Pastor Johnson, I'd like for you to speak to is also his mentorship.
Very interested in young persons like ourselves. Of course, you alluded to working under him. I didn't have the privilege to work directly under him. I worked under Pastor Roach and some other pastors. But as I think about the mentoring part when it comes to Pastor McKinney, notwithstanding that some of us did not get to work directly under him, whenever we got into his presence, he sought to point out certain things to us. And you know, as I think about it, there's something else that I wish to highlight. He had such a large heart, and this is also using the phrase's word, but really these are my words too. And he was not known to hold a grudge. You could challenge Pastor McKinney. You could come on to him in such a way, and sometimes I've seen that some people were not respectful, but it did not faze him. It did not cause him to lower his standard and his way of relating to you. He did not let that affect him. And he would still talk with you. He will put you in your place, mind you. and he will sit down and he would eat with you. And I took this with me. You do not allow certain things to throw you off course. And don't hold a grudge. Be able to relate. Be able to fellowship, because so in that sense, he manifested what it means to be a child of God. There's so many things, like I said, with Pastor McKinney, but all I would want to say is that I just admire his ability to take the punches and not be defeated by it, and his undying love for Ruth. For 60 years, you know, Ruth McKinney. Boy, I tell you, there's so much we can say about this man of God. And you know, Pastor Clark, in addition to my reflections, there are so many others who can tell us so many things about Pastor McKinney. And I think we ought to listen to some of these individuals because they're very, very exciting.
I might say, first off, a lot of people don't know that Uncle Si, as he was known to the family, was a trained soldier in the Second World War. He was an RAF, Royal Canadian Air Force. They were billeted right here in Fort Charlotte. The square that's used now as road traffic, that's where they were housed. And I could remember seeing him walking down, nice statue in his uniform. I mean, left, right, you know. And after they demobilized, he and Brother Scavala, it's then that they went to Jamaica to school. And on returning, he teamed up with Brother Macmillan. They teamed up and held meetings, tent meetings, all over this island. And a lot of souls were of one. He put on a different soldier clothes, you see. And in the field of mechanics, we had something in common. I was a motorcycle mechanic, and he was a bicycle mechanic, although I did bicycles too. And I can well remember he and his brother Arthur, they operated a bicycle shop. And quite often, I would stop there and we'd have a wonderful time together. That's one of the fond memories I have of him in that respect. We're sorry to know of the final end. You know, we expected it, but to God be the glory.
The first time I met Pastor McKinney was in a play, believe it or not. The Slave Maid of Israel, directed by a man from Grantstown known as Eugene Foment. Eugene Foment. I was the herald in the play, and would you believe it, Pastor McKinney played the part of the king. And of course, he had the bearing, and he had the dignity, and from then we had an impression that he was a young man going somewhere. The play was a success, but in real life, I think Pastor McKinney proved even a greater success. It was his opportunity to go on to school, paving the way for those of us who would follow after. And after many, many years in Jamaica, as you know, he returned to be a pastor in the Bahamas mission. I've known him for all of those years since I came back from school as well. I went to Canada, he went to Jamaica, others went elsewhere, but we had a wonderful time getting to know each other, comparing notes, and sharing in the various aspects of the work. While he was treasurer, somebody made the remark, I understand, that what is a fine-looking, able man like you doing sitting behind a desk? You ought to be out in the field preaching the gospel. And preach the gospel he did. For many, many years he led the way, carrying the gospel from island to island and from city to city, as well as overseas. In my capacity as principal of the Bahamas Academy, I got to know Pastor McKinney in a very special way, because he soon became chairman of the school board under my direction. And as such, we worked together to help to build the academy from a junior academy to a senior academy. He was able to attract many of the senior members of the church who were educators to the school, like Mrs. Mary Brennan, Dr. Ruby Major, Dr. Ruth White, and Dr. John Carey. We are very, very pleased that he was able to attract these native Bahamians who came along and supplemented the work done by our foreign and overseas missionaries. So that when the American missionaries returned to America, the need arose for local leadership, and the mantle fell on Pastor McKinney. He was our first mission president, and it was under his administration that he moved the mission to the conference level. That was an achievement. We became the Bahamas Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, led by Pastor Silas McKinney. Of course, he was very instrumental in bringing many of the outstanding preachers to the mission and then the conference, including Dr. E. Cleveland. We mentioned the Moat brothers from the General Conference, and Elder Pearson himself when he was leader. He was able to hobnob with them, Elder B.L. Archbold. He brought a lot of the leaders of the church to the island, so that those of us who would not get an opportunity to meet them in their regular service centers was able to meet them on our own soil. So we're grateful to him for that, opening the vision, enlarging the vision, so that we can see a great aspect of the work, not only at home, but around the world. I remember him as a preacher who liked to preach the real Adventist message. And so when the need arose to do local crusading, he led the way in what we call Johnson Park. Johnson Park. It was Elder Macmillan and Pastor McKinney. And since one was McKinney and one was Macmillan, the slogan arose that Mac and Mac are now intact. That relationship forged them into a good relationship. And so the work grew and expanded because he was giving the local boys a chance to head up the work and carry the gospel flag. To his credit, he was successful in maintaining a type of relationship with us as the leader of the conference. So we all did our part to enhance the work. And if you look at the statistics, the work grew tremendously under his administration. Of course, he had the good fortune of having his second-in-command, Pastor Neville Scavella, as secretary and treasurer, but mostly as secretary. And then Pastor R.I. Hanna served with him for a while. And of course, we had the Macmillan pastors who did an outstanding job. But as I remember Pastor McKinney, he was a man of fellowship. That was his word. He was the high priest of local fellowship. He was able to track old and young workers, and he always looked out for the workers. He would always see whether he could give them just a little more so they can live comfortably and carry on the work. Had a great sense of the economic well-being of all of his workers. He will be greatly missed, greatly missed. There's nobody like Pastor McKinney, the young man who came from Crooked Island, where the straight people come from. May his soul and those who have fallen asleep in Jesus rest until the trumpet sounds and the great Lord returns to claim his own and give them their eternal reward. Jesus is coming again.
Pastor McKinney and I were always good friends. We grew up in Crooked Island together. We associated in Nassau. While he was in the bicycle shop, I always visited him. And when I told him I was deciding to go to school in Jamaica, immediately he decided he wanted to go as well. And so we decided to work toward that. We left Nassau at the end of 1949 and arrived in Jamaica, where we were placed in the old boys' dorm. And we wondered how we could make it, but we did. They first put us in the wood shop to work and tell us that the work they gave us to do was what we never heard in Nassau was we had to tweeze kaya, which was fluffing out coconut husk. And well, we wasn't making very much money because we had to work our way through school. And so we asked if they could give us another job. They put us in the print shop where we worked for the rest of our school experience. Pastor McKinney was the linotype operator. He not the linotype operator, he was the ruling machine operator. I was a composer in the composition room. And we worked together sometimes until late in the nights, up until 12, 1 o'clock. Go to bed, sleep and get up 6. So we had to work our way through school. But we had good fellowship all through our lives. We always related one to the other. We had the same type of friends. And when we came back, I found him to be a very good boss man to me. We related very well. He was the president, I was the secretary treasurer for a number of years in the mission at that time. But he was always willing to listen, take advice, and we had a very good relationship, all of his administration. And so I can say he was a good man to work with. And he was a hard worker, good preacher, and an enthusiastic soul winner. And so I think he did a good job during the time of his ministry.
With the passing of Pastor McKinney, the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the Bahamas has lost a great leader. Pastor McKinney served well and long. He served for many terms, and 2 of those terms I served as the secretary of the conference. He was a good president, and I know him very well. We got along very well together. Pastor McKinney and I are also related. He is from Landrell Point, Crooked Island, and I'm from Pompey Bay, Acklands. But those of us who know the family will know that many of the McKinneys, the Scavallas, are related to the Hannahs, or to some of the Hannahs, I should say, from Acklands. On behalf of all my friends and relatives, I wish to offer my deepest condolences to Pastor McKinney's dear wife, Sister Ruth McKinney, and condolences also to their children and the grandchildren. We will certainly miss Pastor McKinney, but I'm sure we will not grieve as others who have no hope, because we believe that Jesus died and rose again. And very soon now he will return to this earth as he has promised. And when he returns, there will be a great awakening. We will see Pastor McKinney and our loved ones who have fallen asleep.
I deem it an honor and a privilege to reflect for a few moments on the life of a truly great man, a spiritual giant, a profound thinker, under whose tenure as president, the Seventh-day Adventist denomination grew and prospered, all because he demonstrated unselfishness, humility, and outstanding spiritual values. He, because of his friendliness and his sincerity, he endeared many to him, which as a result added much to his many years of unselfish service. He never suffered from iitis, telling others, I am president, so you all need to bow to me. No, he was always friendly and sincere. He was a friend to all and assured that the basic needs of his workers were met. Today, I am enjoying the comfort of a Seventh-day Adventist retiree, all because of the thoughtfulness of Silas Napoleon McKinney. He came to my birthplace in Fowler Street and insisted that I move to a more comfortable location. As a result, he provided me with the name of a real estate agent and directed me to a lot near his home, where I now reside in comfort. Pastor McKinney was always endearing to everyone. He located for a few years in Jamaica, but vacationed in Nassau, where he and his family stayed in my home as I went to New York to vacation with my sister. When I returned to Nassau, my house and my property were intact, perfectly kept, all because he was a careful caretaker. A few weeks ago, just before his death, Sister Sally Fernanda took Sister Ethel Evans, Sister Glenda Roll, and me to visit Pastor McKinney. He was so grateful and appreciated for that visit. As the group sang, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," I did not join them, because if I had joined them, poor Pastor McKinney would have gotten sicker. After they got through singing, they requested that I pray for him. I recall as I prayed, I rubbed his head and prayed, and for that he was grateful. That was my last and final memorable visit, earthly visit with Pastor McKinney. I am now looking forward to the time when I can meet him again and we resume our heavenly visit in the new earth which Christ has gone to prepare for all of his faithful children.
My association with Pastor McKinney goes back to 1968 when I was asked to serve as principal of Bahamas Academy. He was the president of the mission at the time, soon to be conference. And I remember when I first came home, he was very enthusiastic and welcomed me as the new principal, and was instrumental in getting the first newspaper item out on the appointment of the new principal to Bahamas Academy. We worked together for a number of years. In fact, I would say that he was an ideal chairman of the board. Anything I needed, I could go to him and talk to him about it. He supported. If I had any difficulty, I was able to speak with him, and he would come and give whatever assistance he felt that I needed. During those years, we had quite a number of teachers from abroad, and he was very instrumental in helping to see that they were well taken care of. And so we worked together quite closely in developing the program for the academy. He was a kind and caring person. He looked after his workers. If anything needed to be done to make the workers comfortable, he was there to see that it was done. He was a man of fellowship. Whenever we would have church picnics, he would be there and always looking out to make sure that the workers were taken care of. I would say that, as many folk would agree with me, that he was the king of fellowship, so to speak. Not only was he a fellowship person, but he was a kind Christian gentleman. He showed kindness to any and everybody. Sometimes folk would say or do things that some of us thought would really irked him, but he didn't allow anything to get on their skin. He related to everybody as a brother or a sister. And even though he may speak his mind quite frankly and dogmatically, when it was all over, there was no hard feelings toward anybody. He loved his church, and he'd do anything to see that the church moved forward. He was a scholar. He studied. He had a tremendous library that he used in his preparation, and anything that you were able to ask regarding the work or the church or scripture, he was able to to answer very clearly. I remember there was a program called the Young Bohemian Show by Charles Carter, and he was asked to speak on that program. And I recall that all of us youngsters at the time listened intently to his presentation, and we bragged about how well he did in presenting point of view to the radio audience. So I would sum it up to say that he was a man for all seasons, an evangelist, a pastor, an administrator, a friend and a brother, and a good family man. So I want to, in a special way, give my condolences to his family, and we'll always remember him as a kind Christian gentleman.
Dr. Johnson, this has just been so tremendous. Pastor McKinney has certainly been a man for all seasons, and he has impacted our ministries at different facets. In fact, I remember while I was serving in the island of South Andros, one time Pastor McKinney and Pastor Fraser came down. I think that was Pastor Fraser's first time to South Andros, and we had an opportunity to take them out on a boat, and there they were able to catch fish. Plenty, and it was just interesting. But Pastor McKinney has been a man who has been impactful on so many individuals' lives. He's been involved in ministry. As we heard, he's been able to be a mechanic in a bicycle shop that he shared with his brother Arthur. And he's been an administrator,
evangelist. Even an actor, I've heard.
Yes, that's right.
And then a soldier.
And a soldier.
For the country who went overseas.
There you go. To Hog Island.
Oh, that's what you meant by overseas. Okay, well, I guess from Nassau to what we refer to now as Paradise Island.
That's right.
And then also a people's individual, a great, I might have mentioned church administrator already, but so many things. A family man, a caring husband, a loving father, and someone who looked out for the welfare of others.
That's right. And we just want to salute this gentleman. So we thank everyone for sharing in the program today, Dr. Johnson. We want to thank all of those who have been listening and watching the program. And we realize that there's so many parts to Pastor McKinney. It is impossible to condense it in 30 minutes. But we appreciate even you being here with us today. And I just wanted to ask if there's one final word you want to share as we, this weekend, have the services for Pastor McKinney as well.
I think it's important that we continue to hold up this family. Sister Ruth, Rosa, Michelle, and Neil, and of course their families, in prayer, because I can only imagine Sister McKinney, who's been there alongside her husband for so many years, how much she is missing him. I reflect, and the same for you as we go to the hospital. Sister Ruth was there, always, lending support. And we just want to let her know that our prayers will go and continue, and visits and support beyond the memorial, beyond the funeral service, when it really matters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for being with us today on Voices. This has been a very special edition as we paid tribute to God's manservant, Pastor Silas N. McKinney. Voices is a program of the Communication Department of the Atlantic Caribbean Union, and we're just so grateful that Pastor McKinney's life has impacted, has touched each of our lives. We look forward with Sister McKinney and their family and God's church to the day when death shall be swallowed up, when the grave will be no more, when mortal shall put on immortality, when corruptible shall give way to incorruption, and the Bible says we shall all be changed. Until then, let's be faithful so that we can meet our loved ones again. God bless you in Jesus' name.